welcome everyone. I recognize a few names and see a lot of new names, so I'm excited to talk with you all today. If you came here to learn about barriers to regular physical activity with the YMCA, you are in the right place. I am Rochelle Price. I'm the Director of Health Initiatives for our association office, and our association office covers the Peninsula, San Francisco, and Marin. And I have been delivering Hill workshops and facilitating workshops around well-being for several years, and I've also been a coach for several years. I love really empowering folks on finding ways to maintain a healthy, balanced lifestyle. So that's who I am, coming to you today to talk about this topic. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping things just to make sure that we're all on the same page. The first is to let you know what my role is. So I'm really here to facilitate the conversation as well as the material. And I like interaction. So I will be asking you for your participation, and you can do that either through a virtual hands up or using the chat, or if you feel comfortable to be on video, sharing your face, obviously by putting the video on. So any way that you're comfortable sharing, just know that I'll be asking questions and thoughts on the topic. And then I'll also be giving you some space to create your own HEAL plan. And I've been asked before, what does HEAL stand for? HEAL is an acronym for Healthy Eating and Active Living. So that is what we're all about. And we bring various topics that are around physical activity as well as healthy eating practices. I always say this each time, just because it's important for you to know that. I'm not a medical provider or dietitian, so I will not be telling you exactly what you should or should not be doing for physical activity, and likewise around eating. I am rather a passionate person about well-being, so I'm more of an educator, if you will, around this topic. And then the other piece before we get started, most of you know how to do this. I think the main features I'd love to see you use, like I said, is the virtual reactions. So smileys, hands, any of those kinds of things you'd like to use to get my attention. And then additionally, thank you for the thumbs up, Tina. And then probably we'll want to get a pen and paper handy, because we'll be doing an activity towards the end of today's exercises. So the first thing I'd like to set the tone for is goals and objectives that I have for today. We'll do some general review. A lot of this will be things we already know around the facts of physical activity. And then we're going to discuss what makes it so challenging to be regularly physically active, and then give you space, as I mentioned, to create your own HEAL plan around gaining more activity. Like I said, group discussion, time for reflection, and I will be sharing a survey at the end, because I really love to get feedback about what works, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see different. So with all that said, I feel like I'm talking fast. I'm going to take a deep breath and slow myself down. Yep, I was talking fast. So I apologize for that. So what I'm going to do first is just review with you some of the main guidelines around physical activity. Probably have heard this before, but the CDC, which is a Center of Disease Control and Prevention, recommends that adults ages 18 and older get roughly 2.5 hours of moderate intense activity a week, which is 20 minutes, 7 days if you do something every day, or 2 or more days of muscle strength activity each week. Additionally, this is an older statistic, but in 2018, only 53.3% of adults met physical activity guidelines for aerobic activity, and only 23.2% of adults met the activity guidelines for both aerobic as well as muscle strengthening activity. Even older stat, but that's still very relevant. In 2014, a Stanford University project showed a strong correlation between physical inactivity and obesity, even more so than your total calorie intake. And what's interesting about that is that sometimes you can get overly focused on calorie intake, but having a sedentary lifestyle makes a difference as well. So first question to you all is there any surprises in the stats that I just shared? Anything that stands out that surprises you? Or are you thinking to yourself, yes, this is a good reminder?
He is a good reminder.
It is a good reminder. Yep. Thank you. And obviously aerobic activity and muscle strengthening activity do different things. So they're both equally important. So although we know physical activity is important, the reason why we want to focus on it today, partly I picked this going into the holidays because we are going to be so focused on food, but also want to focus on the benefits, right? There are some good news around being active. It has even just 20 minutes of moderate intensity of activity a day can increase your mood, blood flow to your skin, boost your memory ability and reaction time on memory tasks, stabilize your blood sugar, which is a key thing, as well as reduce blood pressure. And 20 minutes of moderate intensity activity can burn roughly 100 calories. So we know we should move. We know that there are benefits from getting active, and yet we have barriers. So my question going out to all of you, and I'd love to hear as many responses as possible, what are your primary barriers when it comes to regular physical activity? Laziness. Thank you. What other things come up as barriers for you? Bad knees, yep, physical challenges. Jotting them down. Time management, yep. Having enough time, not surgery, yep. So really physically not being able to, that's a pretty big barrier. Any other barriers? And sometimes barriers can be actual things. They can also be things we say to ourselves. What other kinds of barriers do you experience? Yeah, depression, thank you. It's hard to get moving when you're feeling low. Pain. And by pain, it's just general pain everywhere or pain from an injury. It could be both. Great. Thank you so much for your participation. So you've given me a few that will fall into categories. We typically like to break them down into 5 different pillars. So we're going to explore together in the next little while what they sound like and what they might look like in more concrete examples. So we have environmental and physical, emotional and psychological, and social. So I'm going to go over the categories, and then we're going to brainstorm ways we can problem solve after we go through this information. So for the first category, physical or environmental, some other things we've heard it from other folks in this workshop have been things like lack of equipment. So that's pertinent for strength training, for example. Distance to facilities, so not having a place where you can work out, or cost can be a factor. Weather conditions or environmental safety. A lot of us have not really wanted to get moving in all of the rain, right? That can prevent us from getting moving. Pain, so we've heard that in the chat. Pain, previous or current injury, or arthritis can be another inhibitor, or frequent work and leisure travel. So if you're somebody who gets to fly around a lot for work or for pleasure, sometimes it's hard to figure out how to fit in the activity. The next category is emotional or psychological. So it might sound like, oh, I just don't have the time, or I'm not interested, lacking energy and motivation. So that could kind of sound like the laziness too. I don't, maybe you're just not that motivated to get moving. Lack of confidence. So maybe you're worried that you're going to hurt yourself if you start a physical routine. Injury is something we've talked about, or intimidation of a fitness environment. So that would be if you were thinking of going to a gym. And then social is one that doesn't get talked about a lot, but that could look like lack of support or encouragement from other folks around you, or you being the primary caregiver of your family or caregiver of others, and having too many other obligations to where it can be difficult to prioritize yourself when it comes to your own physical activity. So now together, I'm just going to ask you to help brainstorm what could be some solutions for each category. So we'll start with the first one. If lack of equipment or tools is the barrier, what would be some solutions for that? And shout it out or put it in chat. If you don't know, we can share together in a second. Yep, go to a gym. Absolutely. Anybody else have an idea? Okay. So go to a gym is a good example. We also came up with considering activities that don't require equipment. Walking, jump roping, using your own body for resistance can actually be a really strong way to do strength training activities. What about distance to a facility? What if that were your barrier? Actually, honestly, I feel like that's the same thing we just said. So I'm going to say the other. Bring fitness home. So instead of going to a gym, have virtual options, which given how much virtual activity we've done since COVID, that might not be something a lot of folks are excited about, but there are many excellent workout videos and trainings that you can do online, including strength-based trainings. Another idea that just came to mind with equipment, you can use a lot of household things for equipment. So cans of soup used as weights and other things like that can be used for equipment. For cost of facilities, a lot of insurance companies will give you a discount or a reimbursement. So that is always something to explore. I know many of folks, if you're retired, you don't need to worry about employer-based reimbursement, but a lot of employers will also give you a discount on a membership if you do want to go to a gym. For weather conditions, identifying suitable indoor activities, or walking indoors like in a mall, or doing stair climbing in an apartment building. What about the previous or current injury, pain, or arthritis? I heard a few folks talk about pain and injury. What would be some solutions for that one? Any ideas? All right. Well, the one we came up with is working within your limits. I think this is good even if you don't have an injury or pain, but doing low impact activities like swimming or water aerobics. And I love what I see in chat, the suggestion of chair yoga. Chair yoga is actually an excellent activity that we actually have a free video. I'm glad you said that. We have a free video through the Y actually that for chair yoga. So if anyone's interested, we can actually share that video as well. Thank you for the excellent suggestion. And then for the folks that travel a lot, which I don't know a lot of people that do, but you could join a national club. Our suggestion, of course, is the YMCA, because we do actually have a lot of facilities across the nation, but there are other national clubs you can join so that it's not an inhibitor from you getting the activity you need. For the next category, oops, I didn't mean to do that. For the next category, let me reshare. We've got the emotional or psychological barrier. So for lack of time, It might be adding physical activity into your daily routine. So through biking to work instead of driving, hopping off a bus stop early and walking the rest of the way, exercising while watching TV. A lot of people feel like that's a novel idea if you don't have a bike or some kind of stationary activity at home. What about lack of interest? What are some things we can do for that one?
Well, Michelle, on the lack of time, I actually pull weeds for exercise.
You do what?
Pull weeds from the garden.
Garden,
So-
yeah. Thank you. I'm glad you're participating. Participation helps. Yeah, gardening is a great thing to do, actually, across any one of these barriers. So when you're thinking of activity, sometimes we can think of also structured versus unstructured.
Yeah.
And I consider gardening is unstructured, but it's an excellent physical activity as well. What about lack of interest?
That one's a tough one.
I know. How do we get motivated when we're not feeling that interested, right? Another way to think of that category is, again, this is definitely an emotional or psychological one because lack of interest can sound like I've already been active enough, or I'm too lazy, or I'm too tired, or I'm not interested in that. So it can be really hard to compensate for that. I think the best place to start there when you're struggling to get moving is to really identify what you enjoy. And again, tying into what we just said, making your hobbies as active as possible. So the suggestion we have here, if you're somebody who really loves audible books or books, instead of passively reading at home, maybe get an audible book and go for a walk at the same time. So you're pairing the activity. But obviously you're more likely to do things you enjoy. So trying to force yourself to start something new that you actually secretly think is tedious is not going to be a very good motivator. And so that kind of ties into lack of energy and motivation as well. Our suggestion here is to schedule movement for times when you do feel energetic. And I think we can probably all identify different points in the day that we're most energetic. What times do you tend to have more energy for activity? What comes up for you all in the group?
For me, early afternoon.
Early afternoon, yeah. I tend to be more of a late afternooner, like right before dinner, but after my work day. We got in the chat morning. So sometimes doing it first thing in the morning can be really rejuvenating. So also finding out when the time works best for you. And I like the other suggestion. I didn't see this earlier. Buddy up with a friend. That is a great way to tackle the lack of interest, motivation, and energy. Having a buddy. I see a question in here, so we'll address that as well about doing more weight-bearing activity. So what would be the best solution there? So we'll address that in a little bit. Lack of confidence, none of you guys mentioned that, but lack of confidence can happen, right? And that ties into that intimidation of the environment. So the suggestion here is start small, right? We all know how to walk, so don't try to start climbing or doing an aggressive hike or running when that's not what you're comfortable with. Just start with things that you actually feel comfortable with and build up slow. And then with intimidation of an environment or lack of confidence, you can also hire someone to support you. So having a coach or a trainer, especially if you want to do weight-bearing activities that are with weights, having a personal trainer introduce you to the environment and the equipment and the right proper form of use, you would definitely want somebody for that. Now, I mentioned earlier, using your body as your own resistance. How is that still a strength training activity? Anybody have some thoughts on that? How many of, let me rephrase that. How many of you, with a show of a hand or a message in the chat, how many of you are doing strength training right now? So I see 8 thumbs up. Anybody else? So we've got some opportunities for strength training. So we'll talk about ways that you can do that as well. And I think, you know, going to that last point on here, sometimes fear of injury can also prevent you from doing strength training, including using your own body weight. So you want to make sure you're working within your limits, and you talk with your doctor about getting clearance, right? If you have, we talked about surgery earlier. If you've had any kind of surgery, you should always consult your doctor before you get into physical activity. So the last category, we're going to brainstorm together. And this, I really would love some suggestions, is others, right? So sometimes we don't have support or encouragement from others. So how might we make that work for us when it comes to physical activity? The suggestion earlier was a good one, by buddying up with a friend. Any other ideas? All right, so asking for support, inviting other folks to do activity with you. I like that. Be an observer first. Jan, do you feel comfortable telling me more about what you mean there?
Sure. I played pickleball like every day until I had surgery, and just being an observer and having, when people just watch and they can see how easy it is, it makes them feel like they're able to get out there and at least give it a try.
Yeah, thank you. So not necessarily feeling like you have to jump in right away or be perfect at it. Yeah, love that. Thank you, Jan.
Sure.
What about family or caregiver obligations? So when you really feel like you're taking care of everyone else and you don't really have, it ties into that time one as well, right? You don't, it's difficult to find the time. What would be a solution there?
Well, I would invite my family to go exercise with me, and we spend some time together.
That's a great idea. Thank you so much. Yeah, get them involved in the activity and doing something as a family. It has been proven that when you do more things with others, the more motivated you are to continue doing that behavior.
You know, I took my mother to the Great Mall last month, and we walk all around the Great Mall. Have you been there?
No, actually.
It's like we walk a mile. I said, let's walk again. You shop and you walk.
Yeah, that's a great example of tying. Some people shopping is a hobby, right? So it's like tying 3 things together. You're getting activity, social connection, and hobby shopping, right? Like you might be window shopping. I like that. That's a wonderful idea. So you kind of nailed that one. Being active as a family. I don't think anyone on this call has little children, but if you do, trading childcare time with loved ones is also a great idea, so that you have time to go do activity, or making your downtime active. So that ties back into the previous one of maybe you're doing some chair yoga while you watch TV together, right? And it's still social. So now that we've covered all the typical barriers, I know it's a lot of information to kind of reflect on. What I'd like us to do, actually, before we do the activity, I wanted to share this because it's important, right? So in retirement, physical activity is still equally as important as any other decade in our life. And the interesting fact here is that older adults are highly knowledgeable. Like we know what to do to be healthy and active, and yet we remain inactive. The number one reason given for remaining inactive was lack of interest. And shortness of breath, joint pain, or lack of energy were other primary factors. So knowing that these things are legitimate barriers, and we have come up with some ideas that we can combat the barrier. One thing to think about if you're not very active, and we have mixed levels here. Some people are very active on this call, some are going to be less active, is you should start with those activities you enjoy. Start in small bouts. So at least a section of about 10 minutes to 20 minutes. Sometimes we can overdo it, right? I'm going to go work out for a half hour, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. And then we can set ourselves up to disappointment. So start small and build up. And then keeping it social, like we just talked about. Dancing is an excellent, fun way to be active. And you can do that with other people. So we're going to move on to the activity. And this is when your pen and paper will be handy. And I've got a series of questions up here that I would like you all to reflect on. And I will be asking for some shares after. So I'm going to ask you guys to be brave and share with a larger group because we learn from each other. And I've learned from previous times of doing this that 10 minutes is too much time. So I'm going to start with 5, 1 minute per question, and give you a chance to jot down your answers to the questions on the screen. And I'll ask that you raise your hand when you're done so I can get a feel of how many folks still need time. So I'm going to go ahead and be quiet so you guys can concentrate. You have a question, Joe, or are you done already?
Done already.
Oh, you're fast. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, V. Thank you, JJ. It's been about 4 minutes, so 1 more minute and we'll go ahead and ask for shares after that. All right. So who would be willing to share what you discovered by doing this activity? And you can share like the whole process, or you can answer the last one, something that you decided you're going to do as a result of thinking about your goals. I'd love to hear some shares.
I can start first. Some of my goal is just 30 to 40 minutes of walking per day. And then some of the barriers is just busy with work schedule and kids schedule. And then the solution I came up with, I should get everybody to walk at night as a family activity. And then who can you recruit for support? Definitely my husband. And the fifth one is, what's one step you'll take today to make a positive shift toward your goal? I would just say we think exercise, right? Exercise always seems like a chore, but it can be fun. It can just be a walk with your family.
Yeah, I love that, right? So you've got a pretty solid plan, recruiting the family to do it with you, setting a time together as a family. And you sounded really confident that you could get your husband involved, which is really great. When you have the support of doing it, you're more likely to do it. And then you said rethink exercise. Yeah, exercise can sound daunting. How do you get yourself to continually rethink differently about activity?
Well, kind of like it can be going shopping, right? That's an exercise. Shopping, you walk around the mall, maybe do one around instead of going into the store. Just do one round, just chat.
Yeah. So, and you're the one who mentioned earlier about gardening. So really finding just general lifestyle activity that you're doing
Right.
already that's fun, and then doing it with others. Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Y'all are being quiet today.
Come on, I share, guys. That's one
Come
person.
on, one more share.
It's the holiday, Rochelle.
I think it is. I'm starting to have a coughing attack. I'll ask a new question. Why do you think I think it's important to think about activity during the holidays? Why should we think about it right now?
It's easy to get so busy that you forget about exercise. So you need to make it a priority.
Yeah, Joanne, that's great. We get so busy thinking about the fun parts too, right? Connecting with our families, getting things ready, wrapping up work. It's definitely a time that we don't prioritize it. So thank you so much for sharing. Give you any other thoughts you would like to share before we move on? I will share, like I have in the past, we have participant handouts. You can reflect on all of this if you would like to do that later. I know some people can be shy about sharing their action plans, so I won't make you do it, but I appreciate those who did contribute and share. So I'm going to wrap up, but I have time for questions because we are wrapping up a little bit early. And I saw a few other questions that maybe didn't get addressed in this particular workshop. But we did explore facts about physical activity, what can make it challenging to be active, and hopefully you all had a moment to create a plan to help you be more active. We will send a follow-up email that'll have our survey and the workshop companion guide that I just mentioned. And I'm going to share the survey link in chat as well right now. I've mentioned it before, but we also are partnered with the Peninsula Community Health to make sure we're expanding our reach. So the survey is where you can really let us know what you liked, didn't like, what you'd like to see more of. And we do ask that you share your zip code because they want to know what our reach is. So who are we connecting with in the San Mateo County and beyond. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up the space for questions that you would love to have dialogue around that didn't get addressed, or anything else that you'd like to ask.
Well, I really enjoyed this class. I'm glad I have an action plan. Right
I'm
before
really
college.
glad you do too. I think the one thing I want to pose back out, and I kind of did, if you guys are feeling just too shy, I will respect it, but what are all the different ways we can get strength training, and why is strength training important as we age? So that's a two-part question. How do we get more of it? And why is it important to get strength training as we age?
I'm not sure just what it is. Does that include balance?
Yeah, it can, for sure. The stronger your core is, the better you can work on balance. Do you struggle with balance?
Nope. I practice it all the time.
You what?
I practice it all the time.
Great. How do you practice balance?
I have some different exercises. Stand on one foot and put your and then put your leg up to your, I don't know how to explain it. But anyway, I do exercises.
Perfect. I knew where you were going in my head, so I was visualizing that. Classes that can help support balance for anyone else that's curious about balance classes would be things like, yoga classes. Pilates is a really good overall strengthening that requires no additional weights, but that also helps build your core, which supports balance. So anything you can do to strengthen your core will support balance. Jan put in chat, bone strength and to avoid osteoporosis. That's absolutely correct. So strength training is really critical to keep as a preventative measure to keep you strong. And it doesn't mean you have to do serious weightlifting. You can use your body. You can use resistance bands. You can use Pilates. There's a lot of different ways that you can strengthen yourself. Thank you so much for participating.
Would planks be strength training?
Planks, what do you think?
Well, it takes strength to do it.
Bingo. Planks is an excellent strength training activity. Any other strength training activities you can think of that don't require weights?
Push-ups.
Yep, that's a great one as well. Push-ups. Squats and lunges, good old fashioned. I think way back when I was in elementary school, they used to call it calisthenics as opposed to exercise. But those are classics that I always do strengthen. So maybe half of it during the holiday season is being creative, right? Instead of thinking, oh, I've got to go do a full-on workout, what 10-minute segment of strength training can I do? Maybe it's lunges and squats, maybe it's some sit-ups, some planks. Going back to the basics and keeping it simple.
Some people have said that sit-ups aren't very good for you. What do you think?
I think that's a great question. I think it goes back to making sure that you get the clearance for activity from your doctor, because there's a lot of different ways you can do setups that's supportive. And if you're somebody who's had injuries or surgeries or other things, you always want to make sure you're doing movement in a way that is not going to cause injury. So it's a roundabout way of answering, but it is very individual. What works really well for one person in terms of sit-ups might not work for the next person. But there's a lot of different modified ways to do core abdominal exercises. Good questions. Any other questions or thoughts out there that you want to share with the group around physical activity? I think this is the quietest I've ever seen this group.
I think everybody's
but-
waiting for their turkey.
I think so, or
Prime rib.
ham, or
exercise now,
whatever
okay,
yummy
Rochelle?
food.
We'll exercise 15 minutes before we eat our dinner.
There you go. Or go for a family walk after dinner.
Right, exactly.
Jams, throw it in there, try pickleball. I've heard that it's absolutely fun. It's social. It covers a lot of the bases. So there's a plug for the rest of you to go try something new, pickleball. And yeah, I always think anything you can do social will always make it more fun when it comes to activity.
Or go walk around the Great Mall.
Or go around the Great Mall. Well, it's been an absolute joy to spend time with you all for the series that we've shared. We'll likely come back with more workshops in 2023. Again, if you could share your feedback, we'd greatly appreciate it. It just makes us refine our process and make sure we bring quality programming. And I want to wish you all a very wonderful holiday season with lots of sociability, lots of family time, and some healthy eating and some active movement.
Thank you so
Thank you all
much,
for your
Rochelle.
time.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Happy holidays, Rochelle.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.